Welcome to the RhiannonO podcast. My name is Rhiannon. I am a knitter living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my wife and cat. I'm an intermediate knitter. I still use that term to describe myself, although at this point I'm also a knitwear designer and a knitting instructor. Very much at the beginning of both of those journeys. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I love just being able to share my projects with you and talk about knitting, which is a passion of mine, obviously. This week, or this episode, I should say, is a little bit late. I was on every 2 week schedule. I was on a monthly schedule. Actually, back up. When I first started this, I was doing a once a month video. And then I started doing every 2 weeks because I feel like 2 weeks is the sweet spot where I don't end up with a huge pile of content that I can't get through. If I want to share literally everything I'm working on, then I need to share more frequently because I do kind of work a little bit here, a little bit there, etc. And I don't really like an episode to be longer than 45 to 50 minutes. I think that's enough time for you to get settled in and, work on whatever you're working on. But it's not like dragging on and on. So, I've just not had a regular schedule since pretty much summer of 2021, I'm guessing. So if you're new here, the story is in fall of 2021, I moved to Milwaukee. Previously had lived in Portland, Oregon, and had lived there for quite some time. Obviously, it's a big shift, but after a year of sitting there in my downtown apartment in Portland and thinking about how much the world changed and how much life was really not going to just necessarily go the way you expect it to because of the pandemic and stuff, I just thought, you know what, now's the time. Like, I've wanted to move to Milwaukee. We had thought about it and we decided to move. So we moved here last fall and spent about a year, almost a full year in an apartment, and then bought a house and moved. And so my schedule has been off, to say the least. I am hoping to get back into a more regular schedule with this podcast. We'll see. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you finished objects, works in progress, a little bit about like planned knits, like near future knitting, and I'm going to share a little bit about books and then a little bit about some of my, what I'm calling woolly adventures. So, settle in. Oh, and I have in the sort of works in progress section, it's not all knitting. So all right, so let's jump in. First things first, I'm wearing my finished Luma pullover. This is a design by Sari Nordlund. I think I talked at length in the last episode about all the yarns I used, so I'll just summarize it quickly by saying I basically curated a collection of leftovers to use in the color work instead of doing one color. So this is a pretty, I would say, like classic Scandinavian style to do a main color and one contrast color. I know that some people are, apt to call it like Fair Isle, but Fair Isle has a very distinct color sense, I would say. What you see in Fair Isle patterns is more like, there's way more than two colors. There's a main color, yes, but oftentimes even the main color will shift between the charts. So each little motif is its own chart. And in Fair Isle, a lot of times you'll have like a different background color here versus here versus here. So this is sort of that I kind of made it in between, I guess, the traditional Scandinavian with just the one contrast color. But there were so many good colors that I wanted to use against this really rich blue, which to me is like a blueberry that's been baked. I mean, it's just beautiful. So yeah, I guess I'll show it off. I think this is the only modification I did. The pattern has you knit this long neck and then fold it over and seam it down so that you get a double hem situation. And I just kind of liked it as really, you know, kind of a funnel neck, not quite a turtleneck, because it's cold and my neck gets cold, and I just wanted to have that like extra snuggliness on my neck. So I left it unhemmed, but everything else I did according to pattern, even though I was very, it was a little out of my comfort zone, but it's so beautiful, I don't care. So let's talk about the things that were out of my comfort zone real quick. The sleeves are very wide at the cuff and they have a very short cuff. Most of the sleeve detail, cuff detail, is color work rather than ribbing. I typically will make something with shorter, like bracelet length, if not 3/4 length sleeves, because yeah, I don't know. And then I like a tight, not like tight in the sense of it can't move, but just like I like a good long ribbing here so that it can both fold up but also like stay snug and stay put, because one of my biggest pet peeves is when I wash my hands and my sleeve gets in the water. That just drives me nuts. And then especially when it's cold out, then you have that cold wet sleeve all day. Ugh. I mean, not all day, but you know. So it was a little out of my comfort zone, but I thought it was so pretty I had to just go with the designer's intent. The other thing, I guess I modified it by not going back down a needle size after the color work, because my color work gauge is about the same as my regular knitting gauge. It doesn't seem much tighter, and it just felt right to just keep going with the size 8 needles after the color work. So I did that, and that probably made it looser, but which will affect the thing I'll show you. So the design has this like high-low hem, so it's lower in the back, and that's really outside of my comfort zone, because one, I feel like then I have to tuck my shirt in so that I don't have like t-shirt hanging out in the front, you know, like I don't know, like right now I have an orange shirt, so if that was hanging out underneath, it wouldn't look great. And then the other thing is that like when you're standing still, like that extra length in the back is fine, but when you start moving around, what it ends up doing is like flipping there. So anyway, it'll flip up a lot, and it also like just makes the back like really poofy. Which I wore this to one of the classes I was teaching at my local yarn store, Cream City Yarn, and everybody was complimenting it, and then they said that's a very modern cut, and then I felt a little bit better, like maybe I'm on trend, but it's a little outside of my comfort zone. I am a pretty classic kind of person. I think I like a sweater that just has the same length hem all around. Yeah, unless it's a split hem, and then I can tolerate a little more length in the back. So that's it. I mean, this is my Luma sweater. I did not even block it. I don't know if you have to block color work. I feel like it's not like lace where the pattern doesn't show. I mean, I think everything looks just fine. I don't think I blocked it, and I've just been wearing it a lot. So the neck is already getting kind of out of shape, and it's probably time for me to wash it and block it. Yeah, but I love it. It's very warm. It's a worsted weight sweater, so with the color work it ends up being like double thick, so it ends up being like I don't know if that would be bulky or chunky or whatever, but like it's just very thick, and it gets really cold here. So yeah, that's my only finished object this time around. I'll tell you what I'm drinking, I guess. I'm having a dirty chai. And I made a cake last night, and I made it just like a whipped cream frosting, and actually just put some of that whipped cream in here, so it's chocolatey too. It's pretty good. It's getting kind of cold, but oh well. Okay, on to works in progress. So I've been just sort of casting on with Wild Abandon because I feel like it and there's no reason not to, but I've been doing a lot more, I would say, smaller projects. So the first one is one that I think I showed before. I'm working on a pair of socks, so I'm following the pattern. This is really funny. I'm following the pattern called the morning coffee socks. However, I realized recently that I'm not actually following the pattern for the texture of the stitches, and instead I'm just doing a 3x1 rib because I didn't look at the instructions very well and I just assumed I knew what I was doing. So the instructions is a 6-row repeat, and at one point on the first row you're doing 3x1 rib, but that's not what you do the whole time. And I just read one row and said, okay, now I know what I'm doing. But they're cute. I'm on the gusset part of the second sock, so you can see I have picked up stitches with the lighter color yarn again, and then I'm going to work in the round until that fits correctly. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I've got that second sock. As much as I love knitting socks and as much as I love having knit socks, I cannot work on these tiny needles for more than a couple days at a time without starting to have like some serious like pains in my hands and everything. And I'm getting better at like not having a death grip on it, but it's just something that instinctively I want to do, is just grab it and hang on for dear life. So I switch between sock knitting and other projects. So with that in mind, I cast on this massive hat, which looks way bigger than any hat should. So, and here's my foot to head ratio. Not good, right? Doesn't look right. Trust me, it is. So this is going to be a double-sided hat. So essentially, well, double layered, reversible. So I'm loosely following the pattern for the Mindy Reversible Beanie. That's like the concept of it. And then the actual decreases of the hat and the stitch count for the hat circumference I took from the Warbler hat from the Lamb and Kid. So somewhere between the Mindy Beanie by Quayln Stark and the Warbler by the Lamb and Kid is this pattern. So yeah, here's how it will be. It is obviously really huge and slouchy, and I look like the Cat in the Hat right now, but I think that's gonna like scrunch down okay, and this of course will scrunch in when it's when the decreases are done, which is all I have left to do. But it's also long enough, it's got enough I guess extra fabric that I can flip up the brim too and have it be more of a fitted beanie. I mean, it doesn't look right now because it's not blocked, and actually I don't want this really on my head because I bought these yarns from a antique store that has like basically reuse crafts. Like there's a craft section, and so they will have vintage yarn or you know, just like yarn that people have I don't know, included with their antiques that they sell the store. I'm not really sure. So the hot pink is from Brown Sheep Prairie Spun. What? I'll hopefully I'll remember to put it on the screen. So it's not really vintage, but I don't know if they still make that color. And then the black wool is actually a Lion brand wool that I haven't seen on their website, so I don't think they make it anymore. And the stripes are actually 2 shades of pink, so there's a little bit of a leftover from my stash, and it's a Malabrigo Worsted that a friend gifted to me a long time ago. So so yeah, I'm gonna have a hat that's black with hot pink stripes or just a hot pink hat. I feel like hot pink hats are really trendy this winter. I mean, they've always been around, but I've been seeing them more and more. And so I am knitting this giant monstrosity of a hat and hope that it will work and that it will be really warm, you know, full ear coverage, all of that good stuff. So I set that aside because I got to the decrease part and then I didn't want to use my brain anymore. I like to have mindless knitting for like work meetings and stuff where we're just on Zoom. So let's see. Oh no, this is another hat pattern that also is not mindless enough. It's just another Father Cables hat. This is a pattern that I have knit multiple times and I actually use it to teach people how to knit cables for the first time because it's a pattern that looks incredibly complicated and only has a chart. So I think if you can do this, basically you will come away from that feeling like, give me any pattern with cables charted, I can do it, right? Because you learn everything you need to know and you're just knitting something small. So it's over pretty quickly. But I call that class Confidence with Cables because or confident cabling or whatever, because I want people to really get over the mental hurdle. Anything that seems difficult in knitting, I think 90% of the difficulty is a mental hurdle. And then 9% is whether or not you feel like having to pay attention. And then 1% is it's actually hard. So yeah, if you are looking for you want to dip your toes into the cable waters, or you want to, make yourself a hat that looks really sophisticated and beautiful and that you feel proud of, and that fits well, I would highly recommend Veronika Jobe's Father Cables. It's kind of hard to find the pattern now. I guess the designer took it off Ravelry, which I didn't know about, but yeah. So that's not what I meant to talk about. I was gonna show off my okay. In October, I was pretty convinced that I was gonna do the Westknits make along, the mystery cowl, and pretty much from the first clue I was like, never mind. I don't like this pattern, but I wanted to do something that was modular and that had a lot of colors to it. In fact, I want to do a few things like that, and I think that's sort of like the Westknits. So if you're not familiar with Stephen West, he's a designer who is pretty much known for his shawls and for being very extravagant with color, being very, having very bold designs, having very innovative designs, and he puts a lot of thought into how to make the pattern fun and interesting to knit from start to finish. So he does have some patterns that are more of like building blocks in your learning journey, where like I've talked about the botanic shawl. I really enjoyed knitting that, although it does get tedious after a while to do the same repeated motif again and again and again. But you, if you pick the right yarn and you find ways, there's still an element of like, it's gamified a little for you. But he's sort of known for the, I guess, gamified knitting, where it's like things that are modular, things that are, you're mixing up textures, you're playing with color, you're doing new techniques, but they're well spaced, so you're not like overwhelmed with like having to do 20 new things. I mean, he's really got a genius for it, and there's a reason he's so popular. So one of his most popular patterns, I guess, or one that I've seen a lot of people have done, is called Vertices Unite, and there's basically large portions of fabric that all kind of like come together and are built on top of each other. So this is the beginning of my Vertices Unite. I guess I'm a third of the way done or something like that. So you cast on at this end with this like these two colors. So there's 5 colors total. I'm actually going to be doing more than 5 because that's, again, the beauty of this pattern is you can just throw in more colors. But you cast on and you knit this triangle bigger and bigger and bigger, and then at one point you begin to decrease it. So at that point I actually changed the contrast color from a more medium purple to a lighter, paler, like lavendery color, but left the background color the same. And then you decrease it down to a point. And then you pick up along the side edge of that and you knit this other direction with short rows and 2 different colors. So you see how you have stripes one way, stripes the other way, and this also is a wedge. So and then again you when you get to, well, because you're doing short rows, you're making it longer and longer, so it gets to there. Then you pick up right here and you knit upwards, and you're just going back and forth and basically snatching a stitch from here and a stitch from there and a stitch from here and a stitch from there, so that it's like seamless. It's one piece, it's solid, but you can see on the back like how you picked those up. And yeah, and so it just builds. It's like blocks that build on each other. I'm having a lot of fun with this. I have this palette that is comprised of leftovers. It sort of was inspired thematically by the colors that are in this, blues and grays and purples and some beige. And you know, I'm not like a huge beige fan, but I feel like in amongst all these other colors it's gonna look really good. And I've got a bunch of just like random, so I've got like this lavender, which is from Jamieson and Smith. So this is a Shetland style, well, it's a Shetland wool, which it's Woolen Spun, so it's toothy. It's what, you know, what you'd call rustic for sure. And then I've got this whole super soft leftover from a sweater I made, also very similar kind of texture, but it's lamb's wool, so I think it's a blend of Shetland and merino. And lamb's wool is the first shearing of a lamb, so it's baby hair, so it's very soft. And this is a blend of wool and silk, also from Holst. It's got I think it's the silk that's like post, or this might also just be super soft, I'm not sure. But there's like this silk that involves murdering silkworms, and like you basically boil them and like take their pod and stretch out the fiber. Or there's the kind where you just gather up what's left after they've hatched and they no longer need it. So this, I think, is the one that's destructive to the worms, is the nicest. Unfortunately, that's why people do it. And this is Quayln Stark Turn, and I had so many feelings when I was knitting with this, because Quayln Stark is, you know, it was a company that was, the founder had you know, built this amazing brand and this amazing company, and then I think retired and left it to her son. And then when he took over, they began to have some kind of questionable business practices, and there was a big kerfuffle in the knitting community about them essentially firing an employee who had designed things for them and then not honoring their contractual obligation to release her work back to her. So she had done designs and they were still selling them and profiting from her work even after, I don't know if they fired her or if she left. I think actually she left, and then it was like a retaliation. So it was a really bad business practice thing. And it was so heartbreaking because it is, you know, as far as just the product goes, is very good. And I love Quayln Stark Turn. And I have been kind of hanging on to this in my stash for a long time, and I used some of it in this color work right here and here. And I had just forgotten how dang good it feels in my hands. And I think that's like something that like I really need them to apologize for what they've done or something, because I need to feel good about buying it again because I want to buy it again. I'm thinking like if I want to get more, I might try to shop, like if people are destashing it or whatever. I don't want to support a business that has shady business practices, and I definitely don't want to support someone who is sort of like destroying the hard work of other people that built this amazing company with this incredible yarn. But just you know, for what it's worth, this is probably in my top 3, if not my favorite yarn to work with. Like, it feels really freaking good. Okay, I don't even know if for some reason you're not a knitter, you won't understand this at all, but if you are a crafter, like certain things feel better in your hands when you're working with it, and it feels good on the needles. Like it has the right amount of springiness and texture and drape and all the things you want it to have. So anyway, that's all. That I just had to say that. For this beige, I'm using a combination of, again, I think Holst Tides, which is wool and silk. But I think what I wanted to say is like, this is the wool and silk that's made with, I think probably silkworms were harmed in the making of this. And then I think probably silkworms were not harmed in the making of this. And the difference of how it looks and how it feels is like night and day. So yeah, so just, you know, a little ethical quandary for you. Anyways, I am mixing it with some Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair, which is kind of my go-to mohair brand. I would say my local yarn shop has Sadness Garn, and so I buy that too. But in terms of having like a great color palette, I would say Knitting for Olive has just like amazing colors, because they do like, they have like 12 shades of white, cream, beige. You know, it's not like a white, a cream, and a beige. This one I think is called Powder, and it's like this beautiful warm beige kind of, yeah, it just changes in different light, but combined with this it really feels like budget and bougie having a moment together. And then the combined strand, oh my gosh, I'm dropping it everywhere. The combined strand is something quite lovely. The texture of it, and especially in garter stitch, ends up being quite interesting because it's very soft but very toothy and squishy, and yeah, it's going to be really warm. It's going to be really nice. So that's that. I think that's all the things I have to say about that. This is more of a long-term knit. It's a process knit. I'm just having fun, and I pick it up when I feel like it, and then I don't feel bad if I don't work on it for a while. So yeah, I've just got a lot of kind of low stakes knitting going on, because like I don't care about having that, either of those hats anytime soon. I don't care about having that shawl anytime soon. And I recently cast on, let's see if I can find it, a Sophie shawl, which like everyone is knitting this pattern right now. It's called the Sophie Shawl by Petite Knit. I didn't even buy the pattern because it's really, if you know how to do an I-cord edge and you know how to do a simple increase, you just have to cast on from one end and then increase every so often, which, you know, every 6th row or whatever. You just increase. It's a long stretched out increase. That little end shouldn't be there, but I don't even know that I'm actually getting the increases spaced evenly. It's kind of hard to keep track, but you know, you just knit that, and because the pattern calls for 2 skeins of worsted, I feel like I'm just gonna increase until I use up one and then decrease until I use up the other, right? I might leave a little bit just so that I'm, you know, I have enough to bind off and whatever. But I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory if you know how to knit through the front and the back, or make one, or however you like to do an increase. And an I-cord edge is literally, you just slip the 3 stitches at the end instead of knitting them. You put the yarn in the front and you slip them purlwise, and then you knit them on the other side. So what it does is it eventually, it actually just takes those stitches, like let's say these are your 3 stitches, and then it like pulls them around so they end up like wrapping around like that, and they end up forming like a cord. So anyway, yeah, I'm knitting this because it's like my work meeting knit, whatever. But I have to tell you, this yarn also feels very good in the hands. I knew it would. It's not often that I see a yarn and I feel like my life won't be complete until I have that particular yarn. But this is one that pretty much from the moment I laid eyes on it, I knew I wanted it. And it's the Quayln Worsted from La Bien Aimée. I didn't feel that way when I saw it on the internet. I felt that way when I saw it in person. And I think that's sort of the, that's why I prefer to buy things in person, even though I can order things off of someone's website or whatever. Like, I will only do that if I can't get it in person. But like, there have been times when I would prefer to, well, like I would, when I lived in Portland, I would drive to Astoria to go to the one store that sold Holst tides so that I could buy it in person, versus just ordering it from the website, which saves money, but like it's not the same experience. So this one, when I saw it in person, I was like, yes, because it's very soft. It's got a toothiness, and it's got these sort of like, well, it's got 2 kinds of wool in it. It's 75% Falkland Corriedale. So Corriedale is a breed of sheep, and I think the ones on the Falkland Islands are very distinct from others because they're isolated, right? So it's a more isolated breed. And so generally when you talk about like breeds of sheep and their different wool qualities, if they live in an area where, you know, literally just the shepherds don't necessarily have access to markets beyond that region, then the wool tends to have an even more distinctive quality. So like the Shetland Islands, that's why people talk about like, you know, Shetland sheep as being kind of special, or like Icelandic yarn has a very specific kind of quality to it. So anyways, yeah, and then it's 25% Gotland wool. I'm not even gonna pretend I know what that means, but basically it's a blend of kind of gray and white wool that's then dyed. So it comes up with this beautiful tonal color, and it's this wonderful sagey green that, like, the minute I saw it, it just made my heart sing, and I was like, I have to have this in my life. And I didn't buy it, and then I kind of like came back and looked at it. So I think it was like the 3rd time I saw it that I was like, I'm just gonna buy this because what the heck. And there are other colors that I don't have any feelings for. And there are other yarns of this color that, based on their texture, I don't have any feelings for. So like I mentioned, I'm working on this as sort of a work meeting knit because it's very simple and it's very kind of soothing, I guess, and feels really low stakes. Like if I had to rip back because I made a mistake, then I wouldn't care. I am roughly moving the marker up every now and then to help me like count the rows of when was the last time I decreased. So because these stitches are slipped on one side, each stitch you see on the end is actually like 2 rows. So that helps me just count. And yeah, so that's what's happening. I am, like I said, seem to be drawn towards casting on a lot and doing kind of low stakes stuff because I'm working on a design that is going to be published, and I can't show you the design. I can't really show you what I'm doing, but I did want to just like talk about some of the technical things that I'm working through with this pattern. So the design is a top-down raglan t-shirt. So it's going to have short sleeves. It's going to be have I think an option to do waist shaping or not, although I'm leaning towards waist shaping as like the default because I do envision it as it's not necessarily a feminine design, but like a feminine fit, if that makes sense. So that's just kind of like my vision for it. And one of the things that I'm working through is how do you have a wide range of sizes where the cast on is the same? Because something that I've noticed in a lot of patterns is, you know, it will be like a simple yoke like this or a top down raglan, but you will have, you'll see it on a variety of bodies, and it will go from being a very close neck to a very loose neck because the designer doesn't want to do the math, I guess, to figure out how do you make the same neckline on every body size, right? Because you cast on a certain number of stitches and then you have to increase out to whatever the circumference of the body and sleeves will be. But the thing that I find really obnoxious about that is that if you look at a design and you see it and you like it based on how it looks on, you know, the model or the designer or whoever's modeling it, and the neck looks one way, and then you knit it for yourself and the neck looks another way, you're in essence creating a different sweater. So I'm trying to solve for that issue because we all have the same size head and neck pretty much, even though our body circumference may be bigger or smaller beyond that. So really, you know, how do you make the neck fit the same way on every body? The next issue I'm trying to solve is how do you incorporate what looks like the same amount of ease on all bodies, because, you know, 2 inches of ease on a very small body is going to look like more than 2 inches, and 2 inches of ease on a very large body is going to look like maybe less than 2 inches. So trying to make that not to where it's like, oh, if you're, you know, a size 10, then you've got 10 inches of ease, or a size 1, you have no ease. I don't want to do that. I don't want it to be extreme, but I want to give it just like just a slight variation so that, you know, it accounts for the fact that depending on your size, things are just going to fit differently. So, you know, for a person who is like, I think the smallest size is like a 34-inch bust circumference. So that's a fairly small person. But by the time you go up to like a size 44, those two people might have the same size shoulders. And they may even have the same size upper arm, but their bust might be different, right? Or so just like trying to figure out how do you make it like fit nicely on different bodies, and not just assume that like a bigger chest circumference equals you know, bigger shoulders, bigger arms, bigger everything. I mean, it probably does, but not necessarily to the exact proportion. So I don't know, just trying to make it fit nicely. And then the other thing is how do you know, is I'm gonna try to account for length. So again, as a body gets bigger around, the length of the sweater needs to be longer because, you know, when your sweater is traveling, you're not a cylinder, right? So it's not hanging straight down. It's traveling out and down. So there's more length that's being kind of like eaten up by the body it's on as the size goes up. So that one's a little more straightforward because you can pretty much assume that like a chest circumference of 50 inches needs more length than a 40-inch chest circumference. And it might even be just like 1 inch, right? But like you can, that is a pretty easy, like, I guess, spectrum to, you know what I mean? It's more straightforward. So yeah, so I'm trying to account for those things. And then also, I think with the short sleeves, I'm sort of torn between just making them the same length for everyone, or again, like putting a little more length on for the larger sizes, because it's sort of an area where it's like, yeah, I could do you a favor by making it a bit longer if your arm has more circumference, then you know, I will say for me, as somebody who has you know, cultivated an amazing set of bingo wings, I have if t-shirts are too short, it ends up like all wadded up in my armpit, like the underside of it just like wads up. It doesn't fit nicely. However, I feel like the length of the sleeve is something that the end user of the product could easily modify on their own. And I don't want to like do your thinking for you or make decisions for you that you could make for yourself. So that's like a whole other thing, right? Where it's like, I want to make it fit nicely regardless of the size you knit, but I also don't want it to become like overly prescriptive of like, here's how it ought to fit. Because you might like the fact that, you know, your body is bigger around and therefore that makes things shorter, or your body is smaller around and that makes things longer. Like you might like that in a pattern, right? You might like that. But I think it's just, for me, I've noticed a lot of knitting patterns, the grading, it feels like, and this is how ready-to-wear clothes are made, right? Like, as if human beings are matryoshka dolls. And if you go up in size, like a woman who's a size 10 is taller and has broader shoulders than a woman who's a size 5. That's like not a thing, right? Like, or size 6, you know, like that's not true, but like that's how a lot of clothes are made, and that's how a lot of knitting patterns are designed. And it drives me crazy because it's like, well, you know, my neck isn't really any bigger than a thinner person, and a person who's larger than me does not have a bigger neck, you know, like we all just have like pretty much a standard size human head. Like there is a range, but it's not like, you know, when you see that neckline that's like out to the shoulder on a large person, and then it's like a funnel neck on a really small person, that kind of shit just drives me bananas. So those are some of the problems I'm trying to solve. And then also, taking a tip from Stephen West, I'm trying to keep it interesting throughout, because it's a raglan. You know, there's a part of a raglan where you're just going down and you're just like making the circumference bigger, and you're just working towards the stitch count, at which point you can separate sleeves and body. And it's boring. There's just no way around it. So I'm doing like a textured detail on the raglan in the hopes that makes it just that much more interesting. So you are kind of doing mindless meditative knitting, but like there is some little thing to pay attention to. I hope it helps. So yeah, that's those are kind of the problems I'm trying to solve. And yeah, and I'm just, you know, it's interesting too, because I'm designing, this is my first garment design, and the idea started with just like a chart that I had for a textured pattern, a textured motif that really I could have stuck that chart on a hat, I could have stuck it on gloves or socks or whatever, anything that was knit in the round, right? And really I could have done it on something knit flat, to be honest. And the publication came back and said, can you put it on a raglan? And I said, absolutely. So I'm operating within the parameters of the design brief, and then also, you know, they have a standardized size range, so I'm designing to their size range. which is awesome for me as a new designer to be given like that much structure, I guess, to work with. But it's also like just poses some additional problems or not problems, but like problems to solve, right? Like it's just like a solve for X kind of thing, right? Where and I'm knitting a sample that isn't my size, so that part is challenging because I can't try it on for fit. But in a way, I think that's also nice because it's forcing me to think about a body other than my own. Yeah, I can't wait for you to see that. I really can't wait. It's very exciting to me to have work submitted to a publication and accepted. I have submitted to another knitting publication before and had a rejection, which is just part of the journey. But it's exciting, you know, it's exciting. And beyond that, I've mostly done, you know, or I've done some self-published patterns. None of them cost money. So I haven't made any money from it before. So it's exciting that I'm actually going to make money from this one. Because it's a lot of work, and so that's cool. Actually, I have 2 quilting works in progress. So the first one I'll just show you quickly. I am practicing very basic running stitch, and so I bought this flannel fabric that's got cats on it, and I'm making a blanket for my cat. So I am going to square it up and stitch on the binding, and then it will be good. It's the same front and back. But I got this, it's actually embroidery floss that I split, so it's 3 strands instead of the full 6. And it is, I don't know if you can see it, but it changes colors from like black to gray to white and back. So it's kind of a gradient. It's a very simple, you know, just kind of practicing the trying to build the muscle memory, essentially, of hand stitching, hand quilting, because it's something that I'm getting interested in doing, and I just wanted to practice on something small. So when that's done, then my cat will have another blanket. And if you have a pet or a baby in your life, I would say like use them as an excuse to practice techniques. Like if you want to knit or crochet or quilt or whatever, something, you know, like they can always use a blanket. The next thing is I made this log cabin quilt top like 2 years ago, I don't know, but it's got all these shades of blue and gray and a little bit of pink, and yeah, I made this a long time ago, back when we lived in Portland. And it's been sitting because I haven't really had the space to do a lot of, you know, sewing, quilting, etc. I haven't had the mojo to do like a big sewing project, but now I have a basement and I've put some tables down there, and I'm starting to like have a craft studio. Right now it's very basement-y. It's not pretty, but it's reasonably tidy and clean and warm and dry, and it works. So I have tables. I have one that's like a sitting level, but I think I'm actually going to raise it to a standing level because I found that I actually enjoy standing to sew. It works well. It's easier for me to like manage the fabric on large blocks, and it's a change because knitting I'm usually sitting. So anyway, so I've had this quilt top, and I am starting to make blocks for the back. So what I'm gonna do is make big random blocks and then just put them all together. So the back will also have some color variety, but not the same level of detail. So, and I'm incorporating this fabric that I dyed with indigo. It's the think it's called shibori. Apologies if I got that wrong, but it's a technique of dyeing where you you know, you basically tie the fabric up. It's like tie dyeing, but with just indigo. So I'm just combining, most of it is like Kona cotton fabric, which is just a line of fabric that's like nice quilting cottons that are sturdy and come in like a bajillion colors. So yeah, so this is it. I mean, I'm just like putting together random blocks of mostly solid fabrics, and that's going to be the back of that quilt. So here's the biggest piece, I guess, or long one. I did have this one like bit of pattern fabric that I threw in. And then I've cut a lot of fabric for the binding, which is going to be a mix of patterned and solid, but like in the same one. So I'm making my own binding. I like doing that. I don't know. I like piecing. I like the fiddly stuff. What's next? My friend gave me a drop spindle, and I got some, oh boy, where is it? I got some fiber to spin. So I am going to be learning how to spin by hand, and I don't think spinning is going to become like a big thing for me, but I do really like the idea of just like spinning a skein of yarn and then incorporating it in like a colorwork yoke or something, like, I don't know. So this is by Pancake and Lulu, hand-dyed merino wool roving. And the color's called Made in the Jade, which I thought was really funny. But it's just like this beautiful bluey green color. And I thought, you know what, if I'm gonna learn how to spin, I have to get I need like a color or fiber that like motivates me, if that makes sense. Like, so this is very tonal, so it'll be fun to see how it turns out. And that's what I'm like looking forward to. Cause yeah, I had this little like bit of wool from Pendleton that I barely started trying to spin. So this is what I made so far. And I just was like, this color is flat and I'm just not as motivated by it. And I thought I need something where as I spin, different shades are gonna show up. And I don't know what I'm doing. I just ripped this apart. So yeah, I'm gonna have a little spinning lesson with my friend tomorrow, and we're going to check out a new yarn store, and I think it will be really fun. Okay, future works. Let's talk about this, because I'm going to be teaching again for the winter term, I guess, at Cream City Yarn. And so the first thing I'm going to be teaching is a just like very beginner learn how to knit class, which I've never done before. And I'm very excited to get people, you know, to get them to try it for the first time. Another thing is I'm going to be teaching a mosaic shawl pattern by Natasha Hornby, aka Moonstruck Knits, and it's called Nyx. It's NYX, so I'm pronouncing it Nyx, and it makes me think of like night. I don't know, like a is that Latin? I don't know. But I've bought a cone of Jameson and Shetland because I'm going to do the main color in gray. It's just a really beautiful shawl pattern. And then I'm kind of stuck on, it has two contrast colors, and I'm stuck on, do I do 2 shades of blue? I really don't think I'm going to do that. This is kind of what I originally envisioned. Gray with blue and red. But now I'm thinking about doing a rainbow. And then I also was kind of looking at that as like, that could be really good. Or gold and dark blue. I don't know. I'm leaning towards this or doing a rainbow. So we'll see. But I'm going to be knitting that as a sample so that people can see what the pattern looks like. And then, you know, when they sign up for the class. The other thing I'm going to be teaching is the drawing sweater by Tomomi Yoshimoto. this is a pattern that I think has just really caught a lot of people's eye. And so I'm going to be teaching it as sort of a take your knitting to the next level class. What's great about it is that it is a like totally charted color work, but it's not like a repetitive color work in the sense of you're not going to do, you know, 5 rows of this color, 2 of that, 5 and then 2 and then 5 and then 2. It's got these big sort of flowers that look hand drawn. So it's a little more random, and it only comes in 2 sizes. So the way that you would change the size or modify the size would be through like changing the weight of yarn and then size needles that you knit it with. And then, you know, you could lengthen the collar or something if you wanted to pull it in, or you could, you know, cast on farther out to pull it out. Like there's just different ways to modify it. And so that's sort of the part that I'm excited about teaching, is that it's taking something that is you know, unusual to begin with, and then, you know, you have to figure out, like, you have to play around and figure out how do you make this fit the way you want, because the 2 sizes that it comes in are kind of like a medium and large. You know, it's not even like a small and extra large, which would give you more variation. It's like they're pretty close to each other. I think there's like a 10 centimeter difference of the 2 sizes. So you know, it does pose kind of a challenge in how you're gonna like make it work, but I'm excited to like be doing that with students and walking them through that. And I'm really excited. It will be my first time teaching color work, and I've become pretty obsessive about mosaic, and after knitting this, I feel like color work, got it down. I can do this. You know, and the trick to teaching is always just being like 2 steps ahead of the students, right? So it really is just showing people that they can do things, getting them to believe in their own ability to figure it out and to make it is really that's all there is with teaching knitting anyway. So yeah, that's kind of my near future projects. And then one more thing that I'm going to be casting on, I'm hoping I will finish my sample knit, and then I will be able to do a Christmas cast on for myself. I have had this pattern in my queue for so long. It's called Sweater Hug by Scandier Knits, and I got this beautiful dark navy, which is like significantly, I would say, darker and moodier than the blue that I'm wearing. So this one looks pretty dark because of all the colors, and then this is a good color. And I've been wanting to make this sweater for a long time, like I said, and I've also been wanting to work with this yarn for a long time, and just like for one reason or another haven't got around to it. But I am a fan of the Fibre company. They make really good yarns. I wish their color palette was a little different sometimes, because there are sometimes I can imagine colors and they don't have it. Like they don't even have like a black in every color. So but their yarn is very good, and what I have heard is that this yarn is particularly good. It's a Romney yarn, which I don't think I've ever knit with Romney yarn. So it's again, it's rustic, it's toothy. You know, if you're into really superwash merino, cashmere, this is not the channel for you. As I go along in my knitting journey, I like woolly, like toothy wool. Like, I don't know, that's my kind of yarn. It's just like it's got some tooth to it. It feels like it's got your back in the cold weather. It's predictable when you're knitting with it, that you know what you see is what you get. You're not going to wash it, and it's a different size. And I do use, like, you know, obviously I use like sock yarn superwash merino nylon blends for socks, but and I do like some, you know, like very silky things, but just the kind of stuff I like to knit and the kind of stuff I like to touch is more yeah, like you can really tell it came off an animal, you know, like it's sheepy, if that makes sense. So very excited to work with this and to make that sweater finally. Hopefully it will be my Christmas cast on, and if not, then hopefully my New Year's cast on. All right, so I want to share with you what I have been reading. I have been reading a lot, and when I say reading, I mean both listening to audiobooks and also reading physical books, because I really like both. Most of my like physical book reading is like nighttime when I go to bed, or like on the weekends. I've been trying to carve out time, and I really would love to have a routine of like maybe every Sunday morning just having a couple hours of reading time where it's like I'm gonna sit and have a book and my coffee and I'm not gonna do anything else. I'm gonna read a physical book, because that's one of my earliest pleasures in life, was just to kind of zone out and read and be like swept into another world. So I'm trying to build that back into my life, and I have been, you know, somewhat successful. So first I listened to the audiobook Fantasyland by Kurt Anderson. I can't remember if I talked about this before, but essentially it's kind of a tracing the history of American propensity to fantasize and to you know, sort of believe in conspiracies or to engage in magical thinking. It's a real interesting one. The author doesn't solve anything, but he's making an argument that Americans have, this is sort of ingrained in our culture, right? That like we've always had an element of wanting to like believe the unbelievable, believe we can get rich quick, believe that, you know, JFK was assassinated by, I don't know, you know, like whatever, right? Like conspiracy theories are not a new phenomenon, and in fact are deeply rooted in our culture. That's the main thesis of it. So it's a very interesting read, and what I liked about it is that he sort of puts all of these things on a level where it's not like, oh, those stupid people over there believe this stupid stuff. He's like, lists all these things that maybe people believe in, and chances are you're going to find yourself in that list. So, you know, even like religion or believing in aliens or, you know, all this stuff. And it's very funny because I think there are a lot of people, like, just as much as it's an American tendency to believe in sort of the impossible or whatever, it's also like, I've noticed like a tendency to be smug about like I've known so many people who are very smug about the fact that they're not religious, but they believe in like extraterrestrials or Sasquatch or, you know, like something that other people would be smug about, like, oh, you're an idiot, I can't believe you believe in the Loch Ness Monster or Sasquatch. But like, you know, people are very, like, I think very judgy. And I always laugh at things like that, because it's like when you're driving in traffic, every driver believes themselves to be driving well and everyone else is a bad driver. If traffic is bad, it's everyone else's fault. And that's just kind of funny human nature stuff. So I'd recommend that book. It does help you make sense of some things, but in other ways it sort of leaves you with as many questions as when you began. And I read a fun fiction read called The Witches of Moonshine Manor. Very corny. I can imagine there being more books in this series, but like there totally doesn't need to be. It's just kind of a silly story about a bunch of witches who are old and like trying to fix things in their life. I don't know, they're on the verge of losing their house, and like one of them's getting out of prison, and she's really old and forgetful and doesn't quite remember things, and they kind of need her to remember things, and then there's a young girl who comes into their life that they are going to kind of mentor. And so it's just like whimsical and fun, not too highbrow. So yeah, that was fun. I read I read She Said by Jodi Cantor and Megan Twohy, I don't know how to pronounce it. And I'm excited because they're making a movie of this, and it's the story of the journalists who broke the story about Harvey Weinstein. And it's pretty amazing to see kind of like behind the scenes of how they did that, and how there were other journalists that had been researching about him, but he was so good at covering his tracks that you know, various other journalists had sort of started investigating and then abandoned that investigation, and they managed to do what no one else could do. And I think it helped that they themselves were women, that, you know, could talk to his victims in a certain way. And also reading this book, like, mad respect for Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, she's kind of a goofball, like, she's kind of like out there selling like weird shit that no one needs, but like she was really instrumental in helping a lot of other women come forward, and I didn't realize that. So it was quite an exciting read, and the book kind of ends on a little bit of a sour note because yeah, like revisiting that time period, there was this whole big, you know, Me Too thing, and then the Kavanaugh trial, or not trial, but, you know, hearings of the confirmation of the Supreme Court justice. It sort of felt like, has the world changed? Like, is anything different? Are we in a better place? And I had recently read the book by Tarana Burke, who was the first person to use the phrase Me Too, although it's important to clarify, she did not promote the use of it on social media as like, you know, everyone confess your trauma online without getting any kind of help. She's very clear that she doesn't believe that people should be encouraged to confess their trauma if you are not then going to provide them with support. But she was the first to like coin that phrase. And so I had just read her book, and so this is sort of like a bookend in a way of like that moment in our history, which is still very like raw and fresh for a lot of us, I think. But yeah, I'm very excited that I read that book, and now I'm gonna watch the movie. Yay. I listened to another audiobook by another journalist, Adam Serwer, who I hadn't really heard of, but then as I was reading the book, I realized I had read some of his articles before. So The Cruelty is the Point is a collection of essays and articles that he wrote for, I think, for The Atlantic and other publications, essentially kind of pushing back on the narrative that politics that appears to be racially motivated is in fact motivated by other things like economic stuff or whatever. And he's saying like, no, dog, like if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck, right? Like it's like, it's racism, duh. And he's really like laying that out well. And it's not just that it's racism, it's like the cruelty. I mean, the title of The Cruelty is the Point is that a lot of these policies that are in effect very cruel to people, people support them because they enjoy cruelty. Essentially, like there's no, they themselves might wrap it in other language, they might sort of sanitize the image of it, whatever, but like essentially the ability to be cruel to other people is something that some people view as an important aspect of their self-identity, their birthright, their position as a citizen, whatever. So that book was kind of it was a harsh read, but it was really, really good. really good. And the introductions he provides to all of them, it's sort of, it was kind of sad because it's like, you know, these may have been articles he wrote in 2015 or 2017, and then he kind of writes this introduction. He's like, yeah, well, proved me right, you know? So yeah, so that was really good. I also read, I just finished The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. So if you've read The Handmaid's Tale, or I'm going to just say if you've read The Handmaid's Tale, because the TV show is a little different. But the book is essentially about, you know, a right-wing overthrow of the American government. People set up an alternative state, much like, you know, the Confederacy or something. And everything in the book is based on something that has really happened to women on this continent, like in the past, or, you know, maybe not on this continent, but like everything in the book is something that has really happened in real life, that there's a historical evidence for, and like we could look back and say, yep, that really happened. And so she put it all together and made The Handmaid's Tale. So then the TV show got picked up, and the book, The Testaments, is, I think, a little bit influenced by, as the TV show was in development, it was like the author came up with some new ideas of like, well, what happened next, right? Where it took her all those decades to figure that out, because the original book is from like 1980 something. So The Testaments is a follow-up. It has not the same characters in it, although there's like a relationship. There's only one character who's in both, I guess. Yeah, so the relationship is different. You see this character in a very different way. So yeah, so it was a good book. I mean, all of Margaret Atwood's books, I think, are very enjoyable to read. I think that a lot of people have criticized her for being essentially for writing stories where the horror is that now white women are experiencing what other women have had to deal with. I don't think that she's oblivious to that. Like, I don't think that she's trying to say like now it's worse because it's happening to white women. I think that her audience is white women for the most part. I think she's she's appealing to a common humanity and saying like, if this happened to you, you would be freaking out. So why aren't you freaking out? But more so, I think most of her fiction that I've read is really about the ways that like women perpetuate patriarchy and women betray each other. That if we all just stopped cooperating with patriarchy, it would end immediately, right? Like, because if half the population says no to something, you just can't sustain it. I think her journey as a writer has always been trying to understand like how and why women are complicit in oppressive systems. So yeah, I know she's a controversial writer, but you know, I've always found there's plenty of food for thought in her books, and they're enjoyable. So even though the subject matter is often very grim, I think it's complex, so I like it. Okay, so the last two things I wanted to share was just about some of my like woolly adventures or adventures in yarn. I recently had my first trip to Chicago. I took a trip to Chicago. It was my first time being there. So while we were in Chicago, we visited a fabric store it's a fabric and yarn store called Nina Chicago, which is where I bought this fiber, and it was just like a really beautiful store. I bought a lot of fabric there. I also went to another fabric store called New Rainbow Fabrics. So it's really nice to have Chicago so close by, because there's not a lot of options here for fabric. There is Joann's, and I will say the Joann's here is like, has a much more, has a much bigger range of products. Like they sell Liberty of London at Joann's here in Milwaukee, but you don't have like your small business fabric stores. So it was really nice to go and support these. You know, Nina Chicago is very much like your little yarn store, little fabric store. It's very curated. It's a small selection. And then New Rainbow is like, I feel like this is where like professional tailors might shop or something. There's just, it's like a warehouse of bolts of fabric, and they have a ton of stuff that's like bridal and prom dress kind of stuff that I didn't even look at really, because I was like, I don't need that. But they have like suiting fabrics, and they have everything from like really inexpensive rainbow sequin like costume fabrics, all the way to like $90 a yard wool suiting, Italian wool. You know, it was pretty incredible. And I will definitely go back there. And we went to the National Museum of Mexican Art, which was amazing. I did not know that they do ofrendas every year at that time of year, you know, which is an altar for the deceased. They do those in honor of people who have died in like mass shootings or died of racialized anti-Latinx violence and things like that. And so it was really quite amazing to see the art there, that special exhibit, and then also just other art that they had. Really beautiful museum. I highly recommend it. It's small, but their collection is, you know, I feel like what's open to the public at any given time is only like half the building. Also, it's free. I didn't, you know, that was amazing. It was free to go there. So, yeah, I highly recommend it. They have an amazing gift shop, and I picked up a couple of things, which I have done a segment called The Handmaid's Tale, or like handmade objects. So these are kind of my Handmaid's Tale objects. The first thing I got is this coaster that is like a hand woven just like simple coaster, and unfortunately I can't find the thing that had the name of the artist, but they did have like the name of the actual artist who wove this. And then I also got this beautiful little trinket box kind of thing, which is a pot with a lid, and the name of the pottery house of the maker is on the bottom. And all of this like where it's painted black is also like raised. You can't really see the texture, I don't know, but it's a very like textural, I don't know, maybe you can, like, if I, anyway, so yeah, so I just got this little thing to hold stitch markers or whatever, and I think that's everything. I think I've talked for too long, and I'm gonna have to edit a lot of this out, but I hope that you are enjoying the season and enjoying your knitting, and I hope that your making is bringing your stress levels down in this time of year that I know can be pretty stressful for everyone. So yeah, I will again, I will not be doing Vlogmas, in case that wasn't clear. I don't do Vlogmas, okay? Just end of story. But I do think I will try to jump back on here one more time before Christmas and try to get back into the you know, every 2 to 3 weeks kind of schedule, because like I said, that works better. Otherwise my episodes are an hour and a half or whatever. So yeah, have a wonderful week, enjoy your making, and yeah, stay warm. All right, bye.